Well, good morning, everyone. It's a
Morning.
morning. It's a beautiful day. Sun's out. Look like we're going to have a little bit of warm weather. So I'd like to go ahead and open our Lake County Council and Mayor's meeting, call it to order. And just kind of like to go maybe Mike, somehow kind of go around the room and do a roll call of who's all present, if
Yep.
you like.
Absolutely. I'll start with our municipal folks and then move on to everybody else. So Stephanie Hannon, Bannockburn.
Here.
Mark Huber, Beach Park. Bob Phillips, Deerfield.
Here.
Nick Leach, Gurnee.
Here.
Erica Frable, Hawthorne Woods.
Morning here.
Brian Joyce, Lake Forest.
Here.
Mike Brown, Lake Zurich.
Morning, present.
Joe Serdam, Lake County DOT.
Here.
Clay Johnson, Lindenhurst.
Here.
Mayor Martirano, Lindenhurst.
Here.
Mayor Jacob, Long Grove.
Present.
Mayor Rockingham, North Chicago.
Here.
Steve Shields, Round Lake.
Present.
Rich Hill, Round Lake Beach.
Here.
Chris Venata, Vernon Hills.
Here.
Mayor Rybeck, Wadsworth.
Here.
Chris Garland, Waukegan.
Here.
Jesus Alcacera, Waukegan.
Present.
Did I miss any municipal representatives? All right, and we also have Ed Gallagher from Pace. Laura Wilkinson, CMAP. Dan Shug. Jeff Perry. John Vanna. Akram Chaudhry. Greg Ellinger. Julie Roberts. Mark Cobb. Derek Anderson, and John Bissell. Consulting firms. Did I miss anyone? All right, we do have a quorum.
All right. Well, again, thank you, everybody, for coming and being a part of the meeting this morning. We go right into the approval of the minutes.
We do have one change on the minutes. Mark Huber is from Beach Park is listed as from Lindenhurst, so we need to make that correction when we post it. So
All
with
right.
that correction, we're looking to approve.
Do I have a motion and a second? If you do, please state your name and you know. so I wanna-
Motion from Wadsworth, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And a second from Deerfield.
Okay, motion from Wadsworth, second from Deerfield, that the minutes stand approved. Are there any question other than the one change? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Oppose? Motion carried. All right, moving on to number 3 is the CMAP presentation. Aaron Allman is the director of CMAP wasn't able to make it, but he does have a recording. And then we will also have from Laura Wilkinson from CMAP will do the presentation today, and we'll hear the recording of Aaron in a little bit. So at this time, Laura,
Pull that up.
or okay, we'll do which one are we gonna do it, Mike?
This is the State of the Region recording from Aaron Allman at CMAP.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Erin Alaman, Executive Director at the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. I'm sorry that I couldn't join you live to deliver this presentation on the state of our region. CMAP, as many of you know, works alongside you and on behalf of you, the county, our municipalities, and all of our community partners in Lake County to help make sure that our region is a thriving place for everyone. I want to thank Mayor Rockingham for his leadership on the Council of Mayors Committee. I also want to thank Chair Hart for her leadership on the Metropolitan Planning Organization board at CMAP. Also thanks to Mayor Rodering, who sits on the CMAP board, and also to Kevin Carrier, who is the interim chair of our Transportation Committee. Really excited to share with you a little bit about the state of the region, but thanks, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you. As the federally designated Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, we work with our partners to develop and implement the region's 30-year comprehensive plan onto 2050. This guides transportation investments and other regional priorities. CMAP supports the comprehensive core and competitive funding processes to carry out our required federal and state planning functions. CMAP receives dollars through IDOT as one of our state's 16 MPOs, and through the Unified Work Program, grants $6.3 million annually to partner agencies like CDOT, Metra, PACE, and our counties.
My computer seems to be overtaxed.
I was gonna say, you know, if it was me or
Let me see if I can get this back.
Program grants $6.3 million annually to partner agencies like CDOT, Metra, PACE, and our counties.
It's like you're struggling for bandwidth there, Mike.
Apparently so. Well, I guess I can send this link out to everyone. So apologies for the technical difficulties.
All right.
So I
So,
guess,
yeah,
Yeah, and maybe I can see if I can pull it up here, or have someone screen share too, Mike. Maybe that might be helpful. While I'm moving forward, if we want to talk about the part stuff and see if we can get some technical assistance while that's happening,
yeah,
whatever works.
We can switch to the part study for now and then see if I can pull this up in the background in the meantime.
Great.
All right, let me pull those slides up for you. All right.
Awesome. Thanks. Oh, Mary, I see Mary from our team. Maybe do you want to see if you can pull it up through our stuff here at CMAP and see if it'll come up to you? I can send you a link.
Yeah, sure. That'd be great. If you want to send me the link, I'll see if I can get it loaded on my end.
Wonderful. Thanks. That would be helpful. I'm going to send it on to Mary. Wonderful. Well, hi, I'm Laura Wilkeson. Sorry, we couldn't have Aaron here and had some of those technical issues. Again, this wonderful time of all of us learning how to do our technical things through COVID. Sometimes they work, sometimes they didn't. So we're still giving ourselves grace with those. So hopefully we can get that presentation from Aaron to you guys. But I am excited to be here to talk to you guys about something that's filling all of my days and all of my time right now, is what we're calling the Plan of Action for Regional Transit. If you go to the next slide, if you're not aware already, last year the General Assembly passed a piece of legislation that mandated that the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning provide a report back to the General Assembly by the end of this year, January 1st of next year, to look at our transit system and what's happening and what the upcoming fiscal cliff that we are approaching. So we can talk a little bit more about that today, but this is actually the language from the legislation. This is in our summary. It asks CMAP to look at the long-term financial viability of the transit system. And when I say that, I do mean Metra, PACE, and CTA all together. So all of the three service boards under the RTA, to look at this financial viability, making sure that we're being comprehensive, that it's a safe, secure, cleanly network. Also to look at land use, to consider all of these recommendations through the lens of racial equity, climate change, and economic development, building on the RTA strategic plan, and that we need to make sure that we look at the recovery ratio, sales tax formulas, governance structures, regional fair systems, and anything else we wanted to basically talk about. So not a small task for us to take on within a year's time, and a lot of things that they're interested in taking a look at. So next slide. So how we did this is we really looked at putting all of these issues into kind of 3 buckets for us to look at it, not necessarily how we're going to address all of these issues, but for us to kind of be able to do the analysis about how we wanted to approach this. So we're kind of looking at it in 3 different buckets. First is the system we want, right? We definitely don't want to just go back to what the transit system was pre-COVID. We want a better system than we had before. So what are the things that we need to have happen in that space? So I can talk a little bit about this today, but that's improving our bus service throughout the entire region. We know that within COVID, the buses maintained better than the rail lines. And so we really understand that that is one of the key elements of our transit system. We want to look at accessibility, fare integration, how Metro moves to regional rail, land use, and obviously safety and security. So we've been spending a lot of time in that space. And I want to talk about all of these pieces today. How to pay for it. Again, we are facing a fiscal cliff, which I'll explain a little bit later in the transit system. So we need to look at new revenues. We need to look at all different types of alternatives, how cost efficiencies and savings within the system can help us, what that does to fare box recovery ratio, which essentially is how much of the fares are paying for the system. So that whole dynamic needs to be looked at. And then how do we implement it? How does this change in funding allocations or any decision-making and governance? So that's how we are approaching the project. So where are we today? We're about 5 months into this process, next slide, before we have to finalize our recommendations. And because we are an MPO structure and because the legislation calls for it, the report will actually be voted on by our board and the MPO policy committee in October. So we're about 5 months out, or 4 to 5 months out of needing to finish this work, and there is still a lot of information that we are trying to gather and research. So we've kind of started to look through the better buses, fare integration, and system accessibility, the ones that you see are on the top. And we're still looking into the land use and operational efficiencies recommendations. We have an entire steering committee that we're working with, again, as well as the transportation committee, our board and MPO, and then wanting to make sure that we get out through the region to make sure that we're really getting a good regional piece of input from everyone about how we're moving forward with this. So the next kind of piece is how you implement it. It's governance. Next slide. And I actually think we can probably go to the next one after that. The legislation, again, asked us how we would look at reforms to RTA or any of the service boards. And we, being good policy stewards here at CMAP, didn't want to just jump to an answer like this is another idea, let's do this. We really wanted to think, what is the problem that we're solving? So we spent some time with our steering committee, and we have a third party consultant on board with us that looks at best practices in transit operations, and they did many stakeholder interviews throughout the region. We kind of came down to one of the perception that the issue concerning governance is really around decision making. Who makes decisions about what for what? That it has impacts to service coordination, the funding allocations through the region, accountability of who again is responsible for the different performance measures, and then the role of the state and other regional entities within that whole dynamic. So what we've been trying to do is take that information, work with our different stakeholders, understand the pros and cons of any reforms or changes we would make, so that we would be ready to bring some recommendations forward again this fall. But most of what I want to talk to you about is, the itchy scratchy stuff of funding options that we need to take a look at. And really, we're kind of approaching this as looking at, again, a full menu of alternatives at this point. We don't have recommendations. When the RTA did their strategic plan last year, these 11 recommendations or options they put forward. So they've already started to say, what are some different ways that we could raise different revenues or change our current revenue system in order to help transit grow, maintain and grow in our region. And this is all operations. So again, when we think of, I know it's kind of splitting of hairs when we think of transit, right? So this isn't state of good repair, and this isn't extensions. This isn't new lines. This is operation. So this is literally keeping the doors open, lights on, trains running, buses running, drivers paid for. This is part of the crisis that we are in right now. So next slide. Right now, how we are funding our current system, right, is through fares, other, which is another bucket we'll talk a little bit about, and sales tax. What you'll see in the red is what the COVID federal aid has been kind of plugging the hole for the last few years. And that will run out. The money that the federal government is giving us to run our transit operations will run out in 2020, into 25, beginning of 26. We do not anticipate that there is going to be another federal relief package in any way, shape, or form. So this comes back to the state of Illinois and how are we going to address this? So with this looming crisis of our transit operations, again, we're trying to look at what are the ways that we can fund the system, because we feel like it is strongly, it is part of our 2050 plan, right? The transit is the backbone of our transit system, our transportation system, and that without that, congestion and all the other things like climate and economic opportunities will fail. So we're very committed to trying to look at different opportunities here. So if you click to the next slide, I'm just going to kind of peek through this, right? Taking this whole bucket of kind of what are we looking at? What are the menu of options that we're putting on the table? So that first top bar that we talked about is fares, right? It's fares and system generated funds. Do we need to increase fares? Do we need to decrease fares? Do we need to have subsidies? Do we need to have different elements, different things that we can look at within the fares to what we can do to help the system? So that's kind of our first layer of analysis. Go to the next slide. Then there's this little other bucket, some of this is City of Chicago's real estate tax, some of it's state funding, transfers from capital that's happened before. We're looking at what are those other spots and different alternatives within that band. And then the next one is the sales tax, which obviously is a critical spot for conversation. The last time we were in a fiscal crisis, we did increase the sales tax with an additional amount going to each of the counties. So in this space, we would like to do some analysis. We are doing some analysis about what changes, improvements, additions to this would we want to move forward, and what are the ramifications of that? So next slide. Obviously, this is the space that a lot of people have had an interest in, or again, have moved forward on transit before, but I think we also realize that has some ramifications in and of itself, and that adjusting the sales tax rate has impacts on our economic space as well. So while that is something that we are looking at, it is also something that we understand has, again, economic ramifications on our region. And so we wanted to look at some other options as well. Next slide. One of the things that we have learned or understand as we go through this is that we have a sales tax on goods. And while that has been very steady in the past for our transit system, the amount of goods people are buying is actually declining. So as a sustainable revenue source, it's not necessarily, silver bullet. However, services are going up in our region. And so one of the other things we are looking at is broadening the sales tax to different services, and whether we could again adjust the sales tax rate, broaden the sales tax to new services, or do a hybrid scenario. So again, we are in the process right now of doing this research. Oh, I kind of went backwards. Next slide. This was the slide that goes along with my conversation about goods versus services. So as you see the red line, goods are going down as a means for our sales tax in the region, while you see services inclining or on the incline. Next slide. So some of the things that we're looking at is how would a tax on services and which services we would even recommend. So you can kind of see how this base works within the state of Illinois. And again, this is something that we're investigating and we're working with our consultant on. So, part of the reason we kind of talk about this is that, you can pay a sales tax on a plant, but there's no tax on having somebody put that plant into your yard. So some of these things, we're kind of also looking at what the equity or good policy around these ideas are so that we can bring that forward. Again, these are different options that we're kind of looking at right now. So in another set of options that I kind of talked about when we talk about the system and fares and system generated revenue are different fees that could come from the road system. So next slide. Again, these are all things we're investigating. This is the menu of options, and we're doing research on it right now to see how much it would yield, as well as what implementation barriers, policy barriers would come in front of any of these. So parking fees and motor fuel tax surcharge, which is again something we're used to in transportation, but may or may not be a good option going forward. What would tolling look like? What would tolling revenues on current systems that could some of that revenue to go to transit look like? What if we told new areas and if some of that revenue went to transit? Cordon pricing in the central business district has been talked about. We're taking a look on that as well. So again, as you can see, this is a broad outline. It's a broad project, and we are trying to kind of get our arms around it, do the research, do some of the best practices in transit in order to bring that to our board, to the MPO, to all of you, and get feedback. So my next slide actually is kind of where we are and where we're going. As I mentioned, this is a quick process for us long-term planners to get all of these answers done within a year, or at least have some good recommendations. So right now we're again in the space of doing the analysis and developing the recommendations. We're going to spend July and September really finalizing those and continuing again to go out, get more input from everyone about the pros and cons, because we understand these are a lot of sticky issues that we're dealing with. And then hopefully we'll have approval of final recommendations in October so that we can deliver it to the governor and legislature at the beginning of 2024. So there was a lot in that. I'm happy to answer any questions, but really I'd also love to get your feedback on how you feel about the need of transit improvements in Lake County, the need of how some of these things would impact your municipalities, and any other input you'd like to give, because we really do want to make sure this is regional solutions that we're bringing to the table. And I appreciate you guys talking to me, letting me come in and talk today.
All right, Laura, thank you so much. I mean, that, is a tough situation, trying to know how we're going to move, transit and the different organizations forward. I know when you were speaking on trying to get funding, anything you increase is going to affect something, or a domino effect somewhere down the line. But we know that those dollars are needed, to move forward. I wrote just a quick note when you were talking about all the different ways to possibly increase, even though the tolls would be increased, but people aren't traveling on the roads as much anymore because they're doing anything online. So, even as we come out of COVID, people are still facing, home working from home. So even with the tolls, that increase in the tolls, but you're not going to get as many cars on the road as we had before. So I mean, just trying to go through this is going to be difficult, but I'm glad to see that you're working on it and trying to see where we're going to move forward in this process. So appreciate it. Is there any other comments, or anyone else wish to make any thing in regards to Laura's presentation?
Laura, can you make your presentation available? Like maybe give it to Mike so we can post it?
Absolutely. And I can also send, we have a page on the CMAP website that is all kind of background materials. There's obviously so many more pieces to what then I was able to present today that it's there. Because I think, again, Mayor, to your point too, we still know that within COVID, 60% of our workforce are in-person workers, so manufacturing, hospital workers. And so we can provide some data too on that. So we really are looking at that hybrid work and what's it doing to our mobility system. But yeah, we will definitely can share this and then also share the page where there's many more materials on our research.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you. Are we able to do the presentation from Aaron or?
I think I have it buffered now and we can play.
The region's 30-year comprehensive plan on to 2050. This guides transportation investments and other regional priorities. CMAP supports the comprehensive core and competitive funding processes to carry out our required federal and state planning functions. CMAP receives dollars through IDOT as one of our state's 16 MPOs and through the Unified Work Program grants $6.3 million annually to partner agencies like CDOT, Metra, PACE, and our counties to fund transportation work and core MPO activities. This also funds the work of the 11 planning liaisons through the Subregional Council of Mayors who help program your federally funded projects. CMAP also manages the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, which is the region's 5-year program for implementing our long-range plan. With our partners, we evaluate applications through the call for projects and prioritize and program funds. The current TIP is $114 billion and includes more than 2,000 projects across the region. We also serve the region through collaboration and convening. CMAP facilitates dialogue with government partners, community organizations, stakeholders, and the public. And we inform and engage diverse audiences in planning, consensus building, and decision making. A good example of this is CMAP's leadership in convening transportation partners to achieve consensus in our region's highest priority projects. CMAP is also a data powerhouse. We produce a wide variety of data, including snapshots at the county, regional, and municipal levels. Every municipality has its own snapshot, which includes transportation and demographic information, economic information, home ownership, housing, land use, taxes, and more. We forecast, model, share data, inform, and shape policy through data research and analysis. And we use this data to assess complex regional issues related to travel, land use, and policy. Overall, CMAP works on behalf and alongside of our 7 counties, 284 municipalities, and nearly 8.6 million residents to advance our On to 2050 goals of an inclusive and thriving region that prioritizes investment and resilience. CMAP is focused on 3 strategic areas: transportation, climate, and regional economic competitiveness. I will now share some of the details of these regional initiatives and what it means for Lake County and how we can leverage opportunities under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. CMAP is delivering assistance to communities to improve accessibility for residents and visitors with disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, requires local governments to conduct a self-evaluation, designate an ADA coordinator, and create a transition plan, which allows communities to identify ways to make sidewalks, crosswalks, curb ramps, and landings easier to navigate. Nearly 178 municipalities in northeastern Illinois don't have ADA transition plans. As the region's planning organization, CMAP is here to help. We've created a multifaceted program to best assist our counties and communities, including education and training, resources, technical assistance, and more. And we're doing this at a time when IIJA commits $1.75 billion to ADA projects. There are other benefits to investing in these improvements besides accessibility. Accessible infrastructure creates economic opportunity by connecting people to jobs, education, and services. Accessible communities are welcoming to everyone. Residents, visitors, and shoppers. People with disabilities in the U.S. have about $500 billion in annual disposable income, which they're more likely to spend in communities that are accessible to them. In January, we launched the Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership, a first-of-its-kind effort uniting the City of Chicago, Cook County, and our 6 counties here across the metropolitan Chicago region, including Lake County. This is a game-changing effort to drive regional economic strategy that will deliver mutual benefits to the partners and strengthen Chicagoland's economic force in an increasingly fierce and competitive global market. Thank you to Chair Hart and the other county board chairs across our region for their support of this partnership. We now have a shared framework for equitable economic development in northeastern Illinois that builds on past progress. Turning our attention to resiliency in our region, we are not on track to meet our greenhouse gas goals and our emission targets. This is one of the biggest issues facing our region. Between 2010 and 2019, overall GHG emissions decreased by 9%, an average of 1% each year. However, to meet our goal, the region needs to increase that to 5% annual reductions through 2050. CMAP created local emission summaries for each of the region's 7 counties, 284 municipalities, and 77 Chicago neighborhoods. The summaries provide a snapshot of emissions from buildings, transportation, and waste sectors. Local governments, sustainability committees, and others are encouraged to use this local data to develop local climate action plans. This is one example of how CMAP is working to advance our region's goals of climate mitigation and addressing the effects of climate change while preserving high-quality water resources. The IIJA also places significant emphasis on this and also provides historic funding to help invest in clean, climate-smart, safe, and more resilient transportation solutions with a focus on equity. The IIJA authorized a new carbon reduction program to help with this effort, and Illinois is estimated to receive $43 million in the first year of its funding. As the MPO, CMAP is required to work with the state to develop a regional plan by November 2023. The region will also seek resources to develop and implement these plans. We are eligible for up to $1 million in non-competitive planning grant money from the U.S. EPA through the Inflation Reduction Act. Completing the regional GHG reduction plan will unlock over $4 billion in competitive funding for local governments. Please be in touch if you want to learn more. CMAP has also been working with our transportation partners on a regional transportation vulnerability assessment to ensure our infrastructure can withstand increasingly extreme weather events, whether that takes the form of dollars or economic activity or time or lives. This assessment will help us access new funding through the PROTECT program. We will continue to work with our partners on advancing widespread adoption of low and zero emissions vehicles and explore the implementation of an equitable charging network for electric vehicles. The state is estimated to receive nearly $22 million to support the electric vehicle charging during the first year of the National EV program. In partnership with Lake County, the other counties across our region, and IDOT, we jointly submitted an application and were awarded $5 million in federal grant funding to improve traffic safety across the region. It will be used to fund the Safe Travel for All Roadmap, or STAR program, and it will help us address the sharp rise in traffic deaths, particularly among pedestrians and bicyclists. STAR will provide technical assistance to our county partners to develop countywide safety action plans using a regional framework. These plans will be unique to each county, build on your existing efforts, and address your local issues. These plans will enable counties to meet eligibility requirements for federal implementation grants. We believe we are at a turning point for our region with the influx of funds from the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. Last year, CMAP convened federal, state, and regional partners, including Lake County, to prioritize and achieve consensus around big, bold, and sustainable solutions to our transportation challenges. The result was a list of 20 projects that align with the core principles that guide IIJA and our region, inclusive growth, resiliency, and prioritized investment. As our region is speaking with one voice, and the message is, an investment here is an investment everywhere. Metro Chicago is the third largest U.S. metropolitan area strategically located in the center of the country and the global economy. It's the nation's freight hub for freight and goods movement. It's home to big business and industry with major highways, airports, urban and rural areas, and so much more. For these reasons and so many others, we believe that this region delivers the distinctiveness that is not found in any other market, and we are driving home that message with our congressional delegation and our transportation partners at the federal level. As part of our State of the Region program, CMAP recently released the findings from our regional public opinion survey that showed attitudes toward key quality of life issues, including transportation, the economy, and climate, and how the region can address these pressing issues. We worked with a leading survey agency to collect responses from a representative sample from Northeastern Illinois' nearly 8.5 million residents. I'm going to share a few highlights with you today. Overall, residents' outlooks remained fairly consistent since our last survey in the fall of 2021, but we found increasing concern around economic issues, particularly the cost of housing. Residents continue to value many of the region's assets, particularly their access to parks and open space, and their ability to get to where they need to go, relatively easy. Residents also showed support for more local action on climate change and equitable transportation investments. In fact, 90% of residents support investing infrastructure dollars in communities with the greatest needs. As part of our plan of action for regional transit, or PART work, we also asked more transit-related questions on this year's survey. As an example, we asked transit riders what improvements to transit they would like to see. Respondents could pick their top two. Here, we show the most popular answers. 1, more frequent service. 2, faster and more reliable bus service. 3, reduced fares for travelers with limited incomes. And 4, more transit options within walking distance of home and work. On the economy front, residents are increasingly worried about their housing costs. On almost all economic issues and measures, residents' outlook worsened by at least 10 points since 2021. However, this isn't unique to the region. This survey reflects a time of growing economic uncertainty, inflation concerns, and other issues affecting households across the country. Employment was one bright spot. The majority of residents are at least somewhat confident in their employment. We also saw increased support for regional collaboration. Compared to the 2021 survey, residents increasingly think that local governments working together across borders will have a positive impact on their own community. Finally, we'd like to share a few climate findings. The survey found that 2/3 of residents have personally experienced the impact of climate change, with the top answers being damage to infrastructure, increased flooding, extreme storms, and extreme heat. And most residents think that their local government is not doing enough to take action, such as reducing air pollution or preventing floods. We also found that 3/4 of residents believe the regional transit system is important to improving climate and air quality across the region. In closing, CMAP is here to help. We work on behalf of you, so we encourage you to learn more about everything CMAP can do for you. Please subscribe to CMAP's newsletters to get updates about transportation, accessibility, climate, and the economy. And visit cmap.illinois.gov to discover how we can make our region a stronger, more resilient place to live. Thank you again for the opportunity to share this important information with you. I will now hand it over to Laura Wilkeson on my team to provide an update on the PART project.
I'm also happy to answer any questions about Erin's video as well. I didn't introduce myself. I'm a senior director on the legislative affairs team here, and I'm involved in a lot of our policy work. So if there's anything myself or Mary can answer, definitely happy to do so.
Are there any questions? Okay. Well, hearing none, Erin, I mean, her presentation was excellent, giving us a kind of a broad view of what's going on in CMAP. As I listen, regarding the housing and how people are, where people are living, and to be able to get that transportation. Like to say with the, either increasing the bus transportation or making it more accessible in regards to either walking or biking to work. To hear, we all know that, Chicago, especially with the rail hub here, is vital. It's kind of the connection between the East and the West. And though we want to increase and make sure that it continues to grow, it knows that also as you do that, congestion comes with that. So, how do you make that fine balance between helping to bring in more rail, but then also, making sure that we're able to move throughout our region with that. So there's a lot of components going on regarding that. So we do want to thank you.
Mayor, I think that's a really good point too. And I'll add, I think when you were talking earlier too about people moving on the roads, one of the things that we have seen that even though we haven't been completely up to 100% of the road congestion or road movement from personal vehicles, trucks and delivery vehicles are up almost 15 to 20% pre-COVID. So we're definitely seeing that increase. So to your point of like rail versus truck on the road, it's a hard balance and dynamic. So we're definitely seeing the truck traffic has increased significantly.
I agree. I mean, I think we all know when we look out our own windows at home, you're seeing more Amazon, UPS, post office, vehicles out on the road making those drops. So again, just how things have changed since pre-COVID to now. So, and we have to take all that into consideration. So again, thank you so much. We appreciate it. So if there's no other questions, and again, Laura, we thank you, and please let Erin know that we appreciate the presentation that she gave also. So, and if we can get that, out on our web, we'll definitely do that. So
Will do.
All right, thank you. Moving on to our current lake STP program. Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. So this, a few updates on our program. First of all, when it comes to the quarterly status updates, that's the first item on the agenda. Really just want to thank everyone for assisting us in getting those completed. We send out those reminders and the spreadsheet, which is a regional form put together by CMAP, but it's a detailed, complicated form that is required quarterly. So we just want to say thank you to everybody for getting those in. They really are critical to us managing the program and making sure we know where projects are trending and tracking so that funding is available when your project is ready to go. As I'm going to talk about in a minute, we have a lot of moving parts with the program, a lot more coming than we've had in the recent past. So it's really, really important that those status updates are submitted and as detailed as possible. We rely on those, and CMAP uses those to track regional trends to see sort of are projects across the region getting delayed for the same reasons, and how, look at those kind of trends to see are there things we can improve sort of throughout the region. So everybody got quarterly status updates into us this last round. We weren't missing anybody, but it's an ongoing thing. We do need those quarterly, and making sure that we're staying on top of our program. So brief recap of where our program is at right now. Our 23 programs in really good shape. We have nearly every project in the program has either been let or has already submitted agreements, funding agreements to IDOT. So we are trending really well for our 23 program. Our 24 program is a bit in flux, and one of the things that I wanted to bring up to everybody is we received some new programming marks from CMAP that will take effect in October with the start of the new federal fiscal year. So there are some changes to the amount of funding that the council is going to get starting in fiscal year 2024 in October. In 2024, it's a net positive. It's about $328,000 increase over what we had been previously planning. But then in 2025 through 2027, it is a decrease compared to what we had previously been planning for. And that's because there was some one-time increases as part of IIJA that are getting passed through in 2024, but then our sort of planned annual growth as a region is starting from a lower base than we were previously looking at. So that's going to take some adjustment because we have to maintain fiscal constraint. The good news is we're not going to be wholesale pushing projects out of the program, even though our funding is reduced. We'll be able to move things around, and then there's also a very large balance in the redistributed fund at CMAP. I know this is a spreadsheet that's pretty hard to see on a shared screen, but a couple things that I wanted to point out here. At the end of March, all the councils that carried over funds from fiscal year 22 into fiscal year 23, those funds expired at the end of March with those one-time 6-month extensions that we can get. And if you didn't obligate more funding than you had carried over, those funds would expire and the council would lose those funds. We did not lose any funds at the end of March, so that is good. But a number of other councils and the regional fund did. And so the balance in the redistributed fund now is just over $73 million. So there is a lot of funding available. In order for us to access this, we have to expend our annual amount. We have to get those funds obligated, and then we can either pull in projects that are ready to go from the contingency list or from future years. So that is really the way that in this change in funding, we're not going to have to push projects out. We may make some adjustments to maintain fiscal constraint, but we'll be able to continue everybody's projects without too much interruption. The other thing to keep in mind, and so this is the current snapshot for our projections of funding, beginning in federal fiscal year 2025, the regional rules say that CMAP will recalculate how much funding each council will get. In the past, for 2025 through or 2020 through 2025, the calculation was based strictly on need. So it looked at the number of lane miles in poor condition and bridge decks in poor condition and congestion and all those metrics. That's how it was calculated to disperse the funds to all the councils. Starting in 2025, it's going to look at need, but also how an improvement score. So did we improve our metrics compared to last time? So those councils that did a good job of improving metrics don't get essentially punished because they have less need. So that will be a component of this new one. We don't really know yet what that's going to mean for our funding mark in 25 and beyond. So these new numbers will take effect in October. And then at some point in the future, they're likely to change again for 25 and beyond. So there's a lot of moving parts. And then the third component of this on the agenda is project changes. So I've received a number of requests for project changes. Projects, a few sponsors have requested their project from later years to be moved forward. Some sponsors have requested an extension in the current year. Some sponsors have requested their projects that are in next year in 25 to move back a little bit. So there's a lot of moving parts between all of these projects, and the funding amounts that we have are changing. So we'll be looking at that in totality, I guess, and we'll provide updates as these get changed. We do have to maintain fiscal constraint all the time. And what it may mean is that projects that are currently on the contingency list may get moved to, or excuse me, currently in the active program may get moved to the contingency list to maintain fiscal constraint. That doesn't mean that we won't fund those projects. It just means we have to maintain a fiscally constrained active program. And we have to put these projects where they're realistically going to go to ensure that we're spending all of our money each year. We may have projects move from the contingency list into the active program. I expect that there'll be more movement between the active program and the contingency list than we've seen over the last couple of years. But because of this large balance in the redistributive fund, we're going to work to make sure that we spend our annual mark as quickly as possible so that we can access those funds. And then it becomes really less of an issue for everyone. We're going to, hopefully be spending more money than our annual allotment. That's the goal. That's what we're going to work towards. So there will be quite a bit of moving parts coming up. So just wanting to let everybody know. I'm happy to take questions on it. Like I said, these new marks, they don't take effect until October. CMAP is going to be providing the planning liaison some guidance over the next coming weeks. So once we have that, we'll have a better idea of the timing of changes and when we'll start to reflect those both in our program and in the tip. So with that, yeah, happy to pause and see if there's any questions. All right. Then the last item under the, excuse me, wrong document. Last item under the current STP program is 2 recommendations from the Transportation Committee to changes to our council rules. Relatively minor changes to the rules, but there are 2. The first change has to do with the maximum funding we award to projects. Currently, the rules state that resurfacing projects have a cap of $1 million. And then in our methodology, we prioritize resurfacing projects that include bike path and sidewalk. But given that funding cap, we're essentially encouraging those items without paying for them. And so because resurfacing costs have gone up, they end up being sort of non-participating costs when they would be federally eligible. So the proposal is that we change the language here so that the $1 million cap would apply to LAFO projects, so local agency functional overlay projects. So projects that don't include sidewalk and bike path, that are just a mill and fill, essentially turning the road black and bringing it up to good condition pavement, those would be subject to the $1 million cap. But those projects that include those other components that are a priority, bike path, sidewalk, those pedestrian accommodations, would not be subject to the $1 million cap. So that's the first proposal. And then the second one has to do with the timing of right-of-way. So currently the council rules state that right-of-way has to be cleared by IDOT by June 30th of the prior fiscal year in order for us to program construction funds in the next fiscal year. So this coming June 30th would be the deadline for us to program construction in federal fiscal year 2024. And as we talked about, there's a lot of regional rules now with active program management where we can move projects around, move projects between the contingency list and the active list. And so I think this this advanced right-of-way deadline, which is just a council rule and does not follow IDOT's right-of-way certification for lettings, is causing more harm than good. You know, it's causing communities to try to scramble and get right-of-way, which is not a simple or quick process, as we all know. You know, months, sometimes maybe even a year in advance of when the IDOT certification deadline is for the letting that they're targeting. So I think we can remove this language from it and just go with the IDOT right-of-way certification. And we have enough tools in our toolbox to ensure that we're not risking council funds if right-of-way does get held up. So those are the two proposals. The change to make the $1 million cap for resurfacings apply only to those that are just an overlay, and then removing the June 30th requirement. So there's questions on those. Happy to discuss. The Transportation Committee discussed 2 weeks ago, and you know, there was consensus to bring this to the full council. So if there's consensus here, we can approve this and make these edits to the guidebook.
Okay, is there any questions regarding the changes? If hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the STP methodology and guidebook updates?
Motion to approve from Wadsworth, Mr. Chairman.
Motion from Wadsworth, is there a second?
Second, Mark Huber, Beach Park.
And a second from Beach Park. All right, are there any questions regarding the changes? Hearing none. Mike, I think we should have a roll call on this one, if you don't mind.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Bannockburn.
Aye.
Beach Park,
Aye.
Deerfield,
Yes.
Gurnee, Hawthorne Woods.
Aye.
Aye for Hawthorne Woods.
Lake Forest,
Aye.
Lake Zurich.
Could we make sure everybody, once you do your roll call, go back and turn your mics off? Thank you.
Lake Zurich,
Aye.
Lake County DOT,
Aye.
Lindenhurst,
Yes.
Long Grove,
Aye.
North Chicago,
Aye.
Round Lake,
Aye.
Round Lake Beach,
Aye.
Vernon Hills,
Aye.
Wadsworth,
Aye.
and Waukegan.
Aye.
All right, motion carried. All right, thank you, everybody. Moving on, other business.
I have no other business today.
Okay, is there anyone else that might want to bring other business to the table? Okay, hearing none, public comment. Mike, is there
I have
anything?
received no public comment of any kind.
Okay, and is there anyone on Zoom that wishes to make any comments? Okay, hearing none on that. Next meeting, July 27th, 2023 is, and that will be in person?
Yes, so we will, the emergency declaration ends next week on the 11th. So we will be required to have an in-person quorum. So we'll need at least 10 communities in person. We are set up that we can do a hybrid meeting at Lake County DOT, but yes, we will be looking for people to come in person to at least make sure we have a quorum.
Excellent. All right. Look forward to seeing all your friendly faces at the meeting on July 27th and kind of come off of Zoom and shake a hand. So with that, again, everyone enjoy yourselves. July puts us right in the middle of summer. Hope everybody enjoys themselves, and again, be safe, and hope everyone is well. So With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved
Second Beach Park.
and second by Beach Park. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
opposed, motion carried. Have a good day, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Mayor.
You too, Mayor. See ya.
Bye
Thank
now.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.